if we're here sitting on the desk and I'm like, Jeff, I need to know right now in 5 seconds if I need to feed higher energy or lower energy, right? There's a way you can figure that out, right? So if you can expand that to the audience.
Well, I think you're talking just the fat to corn ratio, right?
Right.
Yeah, and that is kind of that historic Atwater caloric value, right? I think that's 2.2 times as much energy in fat as there is in a carbohydrate, right? So that at a minimum is just a simple way to think about it. But we would say, honestly, you get below a 3-to-1 fat to corn ratio, and we would always have fat in those diets, and it depended. I would tell you that in my history, I felt like fat had more value in the most expensive feeds. And so in my formulation method, I would see a ratio of like a 5-to-1 before it would come out in my late nursery diet. Your most expensive feeds, fat saves feed. I mean, that clearly does. So intuitively, it just has the most value in the most expensive feeds.
Right. Just like when you feed ractopamine at the end.
Probably. But for sure, you add a bunch of soy, a bunch of expensive ingredients, I would just add a lot of fat, because if I got more growth out of that, it was a lower cost per pound of gain. Now, a lot of people disagreed with me. I would stick 7% and added fat in the very first nursery diet. Everybody at K-State thought I was dumb, and I didn't care. Hell, I was wrong. I wasn't wrong by much. But ultimately, Dustin Kendall brought me back to reality in the 3.5 to 5% added fat range.
Super interesting. Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of focus on that particular one, but then you separate out that first 2 nursery diets, when they're transitioning. After that, I mean, it's just like a grow finish pig, man. Fat saves feed, and it always has the most value and the most expensive. Now, there's debate about, and the older you get, then you get a greater impact on gain, is what the theory is. So Dustin and I spent a lot of time arguing about this, and we built these prediction equations for each diet, and we still found that 4 or 5-to-1 ratio in early growers was more valuable. And I've tried the K-State equation. It doesn't agree with that, which is fine. I mean, pick some data, pick something. You're never going to be wrong.
Yeah.
Pick something, right?
Right.
But plan on moving on from there too.
Right.
So you can do that, and you look, it's somewhere early growers, I think it's a 4-to-1, and the lowest you'll get is 3 to 3.5-to-1. You get above a 3.5-to-1, and it shouldn't be in most of your finisher diets, is what most people would think. Yeah.